Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello and welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Saturday, October 18th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 645 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. And today we are previewing the New York Jets Week 7 matchup against the Carolina Panthers. It is the 0-6 New York Jets who are looking for their first win of the season and looking for that first win to come at home. They are also 0-4 on the season at home, specifically 0-3 at MetLife, not taking into account last week's game in London. And the Carolina Panthers are 3-3 coming into this game, still looking for their first road win of the season. 0-3 on the year, away from home, 1 Eastern on Fox tomorrow. As we always do, we'll give you my roadmap to victory in this game for the New York Jets. What do the New York Jets need to do? What does Aaron Glenn and this team need to do to finally get in the win column and give us something to cheer about tomorrow afternoon out at MetLife Stadium? We'll give you our offensive and defensive keys to the game, X factors on both sides of the football, and of course, matchups to watch both offensively and defensively, with my prediction for this game coming at the end of today's episode, as we always do, to wrap things up. But before we dive into all of that, and even before we get into the injury report and who will be out there tomorrow afternoon in this Week 7 matchup, let's just dive in as we always do. So some opening thoughts and, of course, just some numbers here right off the bat. The spread in this game, Panthers come into this one 1.5-point road favorites. So the New York Jets at 0-6 are a small home underdog in this game. Over-under set at 41.5. ESPN Analytics matchup predictor is giving the Carolina Panthers a 51.8% chance of winning and the New York Jets a 47.8% chance of winning. So a pretty close difference there between the Jets' chances and the Panthers' chances in this game, which is saying something for a Jets team that has been horrible to start this season on so many levels, sitting at 0-6 right now. And that's where I want to begin, just with opening thoughts here on the New York Jets. And when you look at both of these teams, they're really headed right now in opposite directions when you break down their season. You have a New York Jets team that is 0-6. You have a New York Jets team that in week number 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers looked really good. You came away with a lot of positives. And since that point, it has gotten worse and worse and worse. These last 5 games, you've seen a consistent regression in many areas for this team, which is the most concerning aspect of all of this. Even if you were a fan, which was most Jet fans going into this season, that didn't have high expectations for this 2025 team, your hope was at least to win some games, but more so be competitive and show progress as the year went on. The last thing you wanted, the last thing you expected from this team was really to go out there in week 1, look as good as they did despite the loss, a lot of encouraging signs, and now these last 5 weeks look like a terrible football team in all areas, from the play on the field to the coaching, in-game decisions, You guys know where I stand with Aaron Glenn last week, how poorly coached that game was. So a lot of concerns now for the New York Jets. That's the most concerning part. It's one thing to lose. It's another thing to lose games like the Jets are, where they're getting blown out. You're seeing regression. You're not seeing positives. You're not seeing progress. And that's the biggest concern. And that's the biggest question facing this coaching staff moving forward, where you're starting to have real conversations and real questions. If this team continues along this path and ends up, let's say, with the first overall pick and wins 2 or 3 games this year, can you really bring back Aaron Glenn and this coaching staff? And I've said it many times, if it gets to that point, you can't, especially if what we've seen so far this season continues. And I want Aaron Glenn and this coaching staff and this team to start to show progress. I want them to go out there tomorrow and pick up a win and hopefully start to build some positive momentum and start to show that things are turning around, start to show that we really can see a blueprint and buy into a blueprint across these next 11 games. But it's getting laid out early. That's just the reality. You know, you go back to week 2, week 3, when the New York Jets were 0-3, and a lot of the fan base was, hey, it's only 3 games. These are 2 bad losses. Let's see how the rest of this season plays out. If it continues to get worse, then you've got to start to feel really concerned. There was the whole thought process of, hey, if you get to the bye week and you're 1-7 or 0-8, that's when you can really start to have the conversations about this regime being a potential one and done if they then can't turn it around after the bye week. Well, here we are, Saturday, October 18th. Just a little over 24 hours from now is kickoff at MetLife Stadium at the time of this recording on Sunday, October 19th against the Carolina Panthers, and it's week 7. And the Jets play one more game after this against a Cincinnati Bengals team who looked really good on Thursday night in the Unk Bowl against Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Joe Flacco leading the way, 2 former Jet quarterbacks, of course. What a world. Here we are again with 2 former Jets battling it out, but a Bengals team that looked good. So that whole conversation early in the year of you get to 1-7, you get to 0-8, you got to really start to feel concerned. Well, we're right there. If they can't win this week and you go into Cincy next week, which looks a lot tougher of a game than it did just a couple of days ago, then it's a real chance this team is 0-8 in a couple of weeks going into their bye week, going into the trade deadline. And as much as we can sit here and say there's 11 games left, there's still a lot of time. As each week goes by, it's one less game. It gets shorter and shorter. We are already halfway through October, a winless September, 2 games into October. They have yet to win. Only 2 games left here in October. Very close to 0-8, 2 winless months, and going into November with really no hope of this thing turning around this season at all. So very big game for this Jets team. Got to get a win to quiet noise. Got to get a win to start to show progress. We could sit here and say, oh, there's 11 games left. Great. It's going by fast. Soon we're going to sit here and there's going to be 5 games left. Soon it's going to be 4 games left. And you have to show significant progress before then. This season can't turn into one of those years where the New York Jets win 2 of their final 3 games, right? Let's say they beat the Saints and beat the Bills, who rest all their starters, let's say, in the last week of the season. And those are the Jets' 2 of their 3 wins. You can't win those games and say, oh, look, we finished strong. We're building something here. No, you have to start that now. It's getting late. You have to start that progress and start to show that progress right now over these next 11 games, because these first 6, you've seen none of it. And as each week goes by, less and less time to do that. So that's where the Jets stand. Heading in the wrong direction in just about every area. And really, you want to add another layer to concern to all of this, is that last week, it was, in my opinion, the worst coach game of Aaron Glenn's career so far, which is just 6 games. Still a small sample size, but the worst coach game. That's even more concerning from his perspective, you would want to see progress. Last week for him was one of his worst moments as a Jets head coach with the way things ended, the handling of the quarterback, the end of half situations, not knowing the field goal, burning a timeout on fourth down, then punting. Just some terrible in-game situations. That's alarming as well. So a lot of issues there with the Jets. From the Panthers side of things, they're in the opposite direction. 1-3 to start the season. So we're all along the same lines as the Jets in the fact that early on it looked like the Panthers were in for another long season, another 4 to 5 win season potentially. And fast forward now 2 weeks later, and this is a team that's coming off of 2 big wins and now has themselves at 500 on the season. They beat Miami, and last week, the biggest win of them all, taking down the Cowboys at home. By the way, a team that the Jets lost to at home 2 weeks ago now. So something to note. But the Panthers are playing good football. Winners of 3 of their last 4, have won their last 2 in a row. The biggest question now remains for Carolina is the consistency. Can this continue the rest of the way? And more importantly, can they win games away from home? Because they have yet to do so. All 3 of their wins have come at home, and all 3 of their losses have come on the road. And those losses have included 2 really bad ones, where they lost by 16 to Jacksonville, only scored 10 in that game, and it got blown out against New England 42-13. So their road games have been really, really bad this year. Potential positive for this Jet team is getting this Carolina team on the road as opposed to home because the performances have been totally different. But I all week long have said this. You cannot take Carolina lightly, and I think there's a lot of people and certainly portions of the fan base that kind of view Carolina as just a bad football team. And that's not true at all. They're 3-3. They're playing good football. They've won 2 in a row. Like I said, they beat a team that just beat the Jets 2 weeks ago at MetLife Stadium in the Dallas Cowboys. They just came in and beat the Jets at home. No reason Carolina can't do the same. No room to talk from the Jets' perspective about bad football teams when they are right now the worst team in the league by a wide margin. Carolina playing good football, putting themselves in a position here to remain relevant as we go through the month of October and continue on here the rest of the season. So that's the Panthers side of things. And more importantly, continuing to see progress here out of Bryce Young moving forward. But a big win last week for Dave Canales. You look to continue that coming into tonight or tomorrow afternoon's game, I should say. So now the injury report for both of these teams, and then we'll get into what exactly the Jets have to do tomorrow to finally get a win. Jets injury report, we'll start with that. Nobody officially ruled out. 3 players doubtful for this game, though. 2 hip injuries. Cam Jones dealing with a hip. Quantez Stigers dealing with a hip. The biggest news of them all, Garrett Wilson with the knee injury, doubtful for tomorrow. Don't expect him to play. I don't expect him to play next week either, but it's something to keep an eye on. Either way, though, won't be out there tomorrow. I think realistically, probably back against Cleveland in week 10 after the bye week. That's 3 weeks off, plus the bye week, only 2 games missed. That would be my target date. So those are the doubtful players for the Jets. 2 players questionable. Michael Carter coming off the concussion, clear in protocol, will be out there on Sunday. And Jamarcus Weston with a groin injury, questionable for tomorrow's matchup. As for the Panthers, 1 player ruled out, Pat Jones II, dealing with a back injury, and a couple players questionable. Damian Lewis, left guard with a chest injury, popped up on the injury report on Thursday. Not something, did not have a designation going into the week, but now does. Taylor Moton, right tackle, dealing with an elbow. Turk Wharton dealing with a toe. Jalen Coker, wide receiver, quad, will be back, listed as questionable, but expected to play. Austin Corbett dealing with a knee, questionable as well. 2 players to keep an eye on, though, and this has been a common theme for Jets opponents. Damian Lewis, left guard, chest injury, and Taylor Moton, elbow, right tackle. 2 of their 5 starting offensive linemen. Something to keep an eye on going into tomorrow. The Jets have faced a lot of offensive lines this year that have been beat up. There have been a lot of games where opposing offensive lines have been missing pieces up front. Something to keep an eye on before we hit kickoff tomorrow against the Panthers. So that's the injury report. Now let's get into what needs to be done for these Aaron Glenn-led Jets to finally get a win and finally give us something positive. Give me something positive to talk about tomorrow on the recap pod. Give us a victory Monday. Give us 1 week where we can actually enjoy a win and enjoy a good performance. Enjoy something called progress as opposed to regression, because that's all we've seen so far, and it's unacceptable. So key number 1 in this game is establishing the run. And that's been a common theme for this Jets offense all season long, and it's got to be another common theme again in this game. The New York Jets have got to find a way to run the football tomorrow. It's going to be a challenge, number 1, because they're facing a good defense. In a lot of areas, Carolina does a good job defensively, but specifically against the run. They're the 9th ranked rushing defense in football, allowing just 94.5 yards per game. So under 95 yards rushing per game puts Carolina inside the top 10. When you look at the Jets this season, overall, they're 5th rushing offense in football with 135.7 yards per game, although I think there is some context to that. And the reason why tomorrow is such a challenge, like I said, the Carolina defense, what they bring to the table from a rush defensive perspective, but the Jets also go out there tomorrow without Garrett Wilson. And they go out there tomorrow with a quarterback coming off a game where he threw for -10 net passing yards, something that's never been done in Jets history and something that the NFL hasn't seen since Ryan Leaf in his 3rd game in 1998, one of the biggest draft busts in NFL history. You combine those 2 things together, and the game plan for the Jets tomorrow becomes a lot more predictable. But this has got to be a game, even with Carolina stacking the box, even with Carolina expecting the run. This has got to be a game for the New York Jets where they have success on the ground, because that is their clear path to victory. It's not going to be through the air. Even if Garrett Wilson was out there, with the way Justin Fields is playing right now, you don't have enough trust in him. And that's why they should have put Tyrod in. You should make a strong case that Tyrod's going to be out there. There is a strong case to be made that Glenn can't lose this locker room. He's entering that territory. If Fields struggles, Tyrod might be out there tomorrow in the second quarter early in this game. You get the boo birds out, you fall down early in this game, and the offense doesn't move the ball, you have to switch to Tyrod. But before that happens, you've got to find a way to establish the run. You've got to find a way to do what this team tries to do in terms of their identity, and that's winning in the trenches, winning up front, establishing the ground game. And I talk about why there needs to be some context with the Jets' ground game. It's been a bit inconsistent this year, right? You go to Pittsburgh week 1, a really, really good game where they were running for, 6 to 7 yards on first down, 4 to 5 yards and another 3 to 4, and putting yourself in a lot of 3rd and short situations and just wearing Pittsburgh down. You then fast forward to the next week against Buffalo, couldn't get much of anything on the ground going. You had the one Fields 27-yard run before halftime. That kind of ballooned the number, but that was it. Same goes for Tampa. And even in the games against Miami and in Dallas, while you did some good things on the ground, you trailed in those games, so you had to go away from the run, which is kind of also falls into the point of starting fast in this game, scoring a first half touchdown. There's a thought for this Jets offense, something they haven't done in week number 1. But even in some of these games where the run game has worked, Miami early on, you had the killer fumble by Braylon Allen. That changed the game. And in Dallas, right before halftime, you're driving. Breece Hall's running well. The offense is moving. And then you get the killer fumble. So that's why there needs to be some context to the Jets' run game. It's been inconsistent. There's been weeks where they've been stopped. There's been weeks where they have success, but then they have the killer back-breaking fumbles in back-to-back games, which changed the trajectory of those games. And then you look at last week, and it was just flat out horrible. And that's why tomorrow's so important, is because I don't think you can go into tomorrow's game expecting really a big performance from Justin Fields, expecting much passing at all in this game. And if you get what you got last week out of this rushing offense, out of this run game, it's going to be a long day. Last week, 31 carries, 92 yards, just 3 yards a carry, no touchdowns. It was pathetic. And it was against a good Denver defense. And they're facing another challenging front in Carolina. You've got to be able to run the football tomorrow. This year total, Jets, 814 yards on the ground on 164 carries. That's 5 yards a carry, 4 touchdowns, around 135.7 yards per game, like I said, putting him at 5th. Limit the turnovers, no fumbles, establish the run early. It's a must. If it doesn't happen, you're in for very likely a possible performance near what we saw last week. And we talk about this team continuing to hit new lows. -10 net passing yards was bad. They might find a new low. They might keep digging. Fields might keep digging, because that's, let's be honest, what this Jets team has done all season, is find new lows. Can't happen tomorrow. Establish the run. Key number 2, when you look at this passing game, you look at this receiving game, and the challenges now that it presents without Garrett Wilson is major. So my number 2 key tomorrow is 3 guys that I want to see heavily involved in the pass game, the times they do pass the football. Because if the run game's going and they're actually having success, this is a game where you hope Fields only has to throw 15 to 17 times. But in reality, with the Jets, the amount they've trailed this year, there's going to need to be a point where they're passing. And they probably will find themselves in that situation again, passing later in this game because they're trailing. Don't want to sound negative, but that's the situation they've been in. But you look at this receiving core tomorrow, just the wide receivers alone, and then even the complementing pieces, it's really concerning. And you look at what Garrett Wilson has done this year, 36 receptions, 56 targets, 395 yards, 4 touchdowns. He has 31.8% of the team's receptions, 34.1% targets, 37.5% of the team's yards, and he has 57.1% of the team's receiving touchdowns. What's even more crazy is when you look at Garrett's numbers when just taking into account wide receivers, not tight ends, not running backs, just wide receivers. Garrett has accumulated 64.2% of the wide receiver receptions, 64.3% of the targets, 68.3% of the yards, and 80% of the touchdowns. So to put it simply, there is no production in the receiving game minus Garrett Wilson. And Josh Reynolds is essentially your number 2 receiver, or number 1 receiver tomorrow. And I throw this graphic up here for the YouTube audience. I threw this up on Tuesday, and I want to throw it up again. This was going back to 2018, Darnold's rookie year against Chicago, week 8. These were the receivers: Jermaine Kearse, Andre Roberts, Rashard Matthews, Deontay Burnett, Sharon Peake. And I want to shout out Badlands, as I did in last episode, for making this graphic. These are the receivers going into tomorrow: Josh Reynolds, Arian Smith, Tyler Johnson, Alan Lazard, Brandon Smith. Just terrible. But I want to see 3 players tomorrow get more involved: Mason Taylor, Arian Smith, Breece Hall. I've talked about Arian Smith a lot in terms of vertical and sending him vertical downfield, taking shots down the field, something that the Jets have not done enough of this year, something that Justin Fields, for the amount of time he holds on to the football and the amount of deep shots that he doesn't take, is super, super alarming. Because if you're going to hold on to the football, that's usually when you're taking those deep shots, and he does not do that. His average depth of target and his time to throw is awful. Not a good ratio at all for Justin Fields. So I would like to see some deep shots. But Arian Smith in general, you want to see just his entire route tree tomorrow get utilized a lot more. Let's see what he looks like. Give him the opportunity. He's had only 4 receptions on 6 targets and 24 yards this season. He's barely been involved. Mason Taylor against Dallas and Miami, 2 really good games. You saw a lot of positive things. Last week, similar to the rest of the offense, not a whole lot going. On the year, 21 receptions, 29 targets, 177 yards, 8.4 yards per reception. Get him involved tomorrow. This needs to be a game where you get Mason Taylor involved, you get Arian Smith involved, 2 rookies. And I throw Breece Hall out there as well because, number one, they have not gotten Breece involved nearly enough in the receiving game. And Glenn actually mentioned that in his Friday press conference, something that needs to change. And hopefully that changes tomorrow. This season so far, Breece has had only 17 receptions on 24 targets for 150 yards, 8.8 yards per reception. Not nearly good enough. And if he continues that trend tomorrow, it's going to be a very long day. Breece is arguably one of the more talented receivers tomorrow. Really. So utilize Breece out of the backfield on some of design concepts for him. Get Arian Smith involved. Multiple route tree. Really expand his route tree tomorrow. And Mason Taylor as well as sort of that safety blanket. Those are 3 guys that I think you have to trust the most and that you want to see the most. Allen Lazard, you really have you know what he is. Tyler Johnson, Josh Reynolds, none of those guys really move the needle for you. 2 rookies in Mason Taylor and Arian Smith, and a player in Breece Hall who we all know what he can do out of the backfield when used properly as a receiver. You piece those things together, that's your path to making up for what Garrett Wilson brings. You're not going to fully make up for it, but that's your path to getting pretty close to it and having any chance of doing it. So that's key number 2. My final key for the offense, and this is kind of an interesting one just because now you heard this week with Justin Fields how he hasn't been 100%, dealing with the knee going back to Miami. That potentially throws kind of a wrench into some of why you haven't seen Fields' rushing ability. But we talk about the issues he's had as a passer. We talk about just the deficit that the Jets go into tomorrow's game with at receiver. We talk about needing to establish the run. And I think this is kind of a perfect way to close out what the Jets need to do on offense. And that's Justin Fields needing to have a really big game with his legs. However you want to frame it. Using Fields' legs, Fields taking off and running, however you want to frame it, Fields tomorrow needs to utilize his mobility to his advantage because that, to me, has been one of the most concerning aspects of the last 2 weeks for Justin Fields, and more so last week than anything. Because the one thing throughout Fields' career and throughout this season, early in the year at least, that you could count on with Justin Fields, whether he was having a good day through the air or not, is his athleticism and his ability to break out a big run at any time, and his ability to utilize his legs to help this offense, help this run game. And his ability to use those legs is another weapon, another tool for this offense. That's one thing that no matter the passing struggles, you would typically see out of Justin Fields. The last 2 games, though, you haven't seen it. Last week, more importantly, you have barely seen it. And I do pinpoint some of that on Tanner Engstrand, and I said that in the postgame pod, and I said it on Monday. I think these last couple of games, the Jets haven't put Fields has been terrible, don't get me wrong. But there also has been the side of it that there's been some situations where Fields hasn't been put in the best spot. There hasn't been much of rolling Fields out of the pocket. There hasn't been many design quarterback runs. But there also hasn't been many situations where Fields, when he's able to break free from the pocket and run and salvage the play, he's now just staying in the pocket and taking unnecessary sacks. So there is that side of it as well. So you accumulate all that together, you get to 1 point. Fields has got to be better tomorrow with his legs. And I think some of it has to be the injury that he's been dealing with going back to Miami, and that potentially is part of why there hasn't been many design runs and why you haven't seen the same burst. I mean, you go back to last week, there was a play on a design run where Fields, a healthy Fields, a normal Fields, probably takes it and picks up more yards. Instead, kind of just went out of bounds. I don't want to say lethargically, but kind of just gave himself up. That's not the type of player he is as a runner. And tomorrow that needs to change. And I think you look at the numbers, you watch them, the games, and you could tell. But you look at the numbers from the first 3 games of the season for Justin Fields compared to what we've seen the last 2 games, it really is alarming. The first 3 weeks, Fields had 24 carries, 178 yards, and 3 touchdowns. 7.4 yards per carry. You fast forward to the last 2 games for Fields, just 14 carries for 57 yards, no touchdowns. And oh, by the way, averaging 3 less yards per carry at just 4.1. On total in the year, 38 carries, 235 yards, 3 touchdowns, 6.2 yards per carry. So the point to bring all this up is the drop-off has been alarming. First 3 games of the season is 63.1% of his carries came, 75.7% of his yards. His yards per carry has dropped off 3.3 yards over the last 2 games. And all of his touchdowns came in the first 3 games. So it's been alarming. And you even look at just the long runs. 15-yard run against Pittsburgh was his long of the day. 27 yards against Buffalo, the long of the day. And then he had that crazy 43-yard touchdown against Miami on his way for a season-high 81 yards. You look at his last 2 weeks, the longest run, 11 against Dallas, 8 against Denver. The 2 shortest in a single game this season. That's concerning. There's clearly something going on there. So tomorrow, Fields has got to get back to utilizing his legs like he normally can. Engstrand has to do more of it. Fields has to be able to scramble away from some of these pressures and extend plays with his legs. It has to happen tomorrow. And you just talk about establishing the run and finding ways to have success without Garrett Wilson and without much of a passing game. Fields utilizing his legs and picking up yards that way is one of the ways you can try and make up ground in that area. So that's the offensive side of the football. Establish the run, get Mason Taylor, Aaron Smith, Breece Hall involved in the pass game, and utilize Justin Fields' legs. Moving on now to the defensive side of the football. This is interesting, the whole situation. But my first key is containing Rico Dowdle. Now, it's an interesting situation because as we sit here on Saturday, October 18th, like I said, just a little over 24 hours away from game time tomorrow afternoon, the Panthers have made a decision on who their starting running back will be. Dave Canales won't reveal who that is, but the organization has made their decision. Chuba Hubbard, who has missed the last 2 games with a calf injury, is back in the lineup tomorrow. Do the Panthers go back to Chuba Hubbard, their starter from the beginning, or do they stick with Rico Dowdle, who has had a historic last 2 games in place of Chuba Hubbard? And I'll throw 2 numbers out here for you before we break down everything else with Rico Dowdle. Over the past 2 games, Dowdle has rushed for 389 yards, which is falling just 17 yards short. And he fell just 17 yards short in Sunday's win over the Cowboys of becoming the 5th player in NFL history to run for 200 or more yards in consecutive games. That close. You go to Carolina Panthers history, he had the most scrimmage yards in a single game in Panthers history last week against Dallas. That's how good Rico Dowdle was. What we have seen from Rico Dowdle these last 2 games has been incredible. And I'll break down the full numbers here. You go to Miami, first game in replace for Chuba Hubbard, 23 carries, 206 yards, 9 yards a carry, 1 touchdown. You go to last week against Dallas, 30 carries, 183 yards, 6.1 yards per carry, no rushing touchdowns, but did have one receiving touchdown. That's in total 2 games, 53 carries, 389 yards, 7.3 yards per carry, 1 touchdown. That is insane. Insane numbers for Rico Dowdle. Almost 400 yards in 2 games. On the season, you look at his numbers, they rank pretty high just based off of these last 2 games. 81 carries, that's 20th in the NFL. 472 yards is 5th among running backs. He's tied 26th in touchdowns, so a little bit on the lower end. But he's 5th in yards after just 2 games as a starter. He's been crazy. So you've got to find a way to slow him down tomorrow because Rico Dowdle right now is dominant. He's unstoppable right now. There's no other way to put it. Now, you look at the Chuba Hubbard side of things, 53 carries, 217 yards, 4.1 yards per carry prior to the injury. Last year, obviously had the big 10 touchdown, 1,195-yard season where he really broke out in his 4th year in the NFL, of course. Now in year number 5, the 4th-round pick out of Oklahoma State, 26 years old. Either way, my key here and whole point here is whether or not Rico Dowdle is the starter or Chuba Hubbard, you've got to find a way to slow them both down because very quickly here they've become a very under-the-radar running back duo. And in the event when Rico Dowdle is out there, you have got to find a way to contain him, got to find a way to slow him down because these last 2 weeks he's taken over. And if he goes out there tomorrow and puts up that type of performance, there's no chance the Jets come away with a win here. 23rd ranked rush defense in football, 130 yards. They were better last week, but still a defense that has struggled against the run. Rico Dowdle, Chuba Hubbard, both present challenges. So that's key number 1. Moving on now to key number 2 is getting pressure on Bryce Young. The Jets defense is coming off of a game here where against Denver where they played well. And it was a nice step in the right direction. Can that continue this week? Only time will tell. But if it is going to continue, you hope it can continue in the form of getting home to Bryce Young. When you look at Bryce Young this season and his numbers, he's completed 61.8% of his passes for 1,150 yards, 5.8 yards per completion or attempt, 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, an 84 passer rating, and a 42.7 QBR. The last couple of games here for Bryce Young, you've seen some positives in terms of heading in the right direction for his development. 5 touchdowns in the last 2 games, 3 touchdowns last week. He had the big 328-yard, 3-touchdown performance against Arizona despite the loss in week 2. Some of Bryce Young's highlights. He's also had some duds. He's also had some games where you haven't seen much of. But all in all, it's been more good than bad so far this year for Bryce Young. And what's interesting about Bryce Young, actually, is the way he's handled pressure this season. And I still think it's very important tomorrow to get home to Bryce Young. And it's a big piece in this Jets team having success because they were able to get home to Bo Nix a lot more than in previous weeks. And there's one big player that has impacted that. But you look at Bryce Young and his constant evolution with pressure. His rookie year going back to 2023 really struggled. 39.1% completion percentage, 675 yards, 1 touchdown, and 4 interceptions when pressured. Last year, saw a bit of improvement. 43.2% completion percentage, 859 yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 picks. This year, a lot more improvement. Probably one of the bigger improving areas of his game. That is 47.8% completion percentage, 389 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 pick when pressured. So he has handled pressure a lot better. But I still view this as a matchup and a quarterback where you can get home to, you're going to have a lot of success. Still a young player, still a player who has had some bumps in the road already this season, still figuring out his way here in the NFL, the former 2023 first-round pick. And it's just so important in general for this Jets defense because you look at games where they're able to get pressure, and this is with any defense, but specifically this Jets defense because it hasn't happened enough this season. But you look at games like last week where they're able to get a little bit more pressure on Bo Nix. We're able to do a lot more from a defensive line perspective. You saw a massive increase in this Jets defense's production. And a big reason for that was Jermaine Johnson returning. He went out there last week, had a sack, 3 pressures, 3 run stops, 3 total tackles. Big return for him. On the year, 3 games played, although technically it's about 2.5 because it was halfway through Buffalo game. But 3 games played total, 1 sack, 9 pressures, 3 run stops, 12 tackles for 12 total tackles. Back out there tomorrow. Will McDonald make some plays? Can we see that tomorrow? Jermaine, another big game. Quinnen in the interior. You need those guys to continue to step up. Final defensive key here for the New York Jets is take away Tet McMillan. And I truly mean it pretty simply like that. It's take him away. Because you actually look at this Carolina Panthers offense, and it's not on the same level as the Jets in terms of it's Garrett Wilson and everybody else, but obviously you have Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard, as we talked about, 2 running backs who can do a lot of damage. Rico Dowdle doing things that very rarely are seen in the NFL over the last 2 games with 389 yards in 2 weeks. But you look at this receiving game for Carolina, and it's not really striking much fear into you as a defense. As bad as the Jets defense plays, this is an offense that you can actually match up against pretty well when it comes to the air attack. And you look at Tet McMillan so far this season, 27 receptions, 48 targets, 380 yards, 14.1 yards per reception, and 2 touchdowns. You look at Tet McMillan and the players around him, and I know they get Jalen Coker back in this game, but there's nobody that really fully scares you on the rest of this passing attack, rest of this receiving game. Xavier Legette is a guy who went out there last year, showed you some positives down the stretch, but has come into this season and hasn't done a whole lot and has actually played pretty poor. You have a guy in Hunter Renfrow who really just got picked up, right? You know, before the season was retired, then came back. 89 yards in 6 games. Not anybody's going to strike fear in you. Jadavion Sanders at tight end. Jimmy Horn Jr. You do get Coker back. Even David Moore prior to the injury. It's really Tet McMillan and everybody else, and I think it shows when you look at the rest of the receivers. You look at this receiving core as a whole. Right, as I mentioned, Tet McMillan, 27 receptions, 48 targets, 380 yards, 14.1 yards per reception, and 2 touchdowns. You look at the rest and the production there. Tet McMillan has 28.7% of the receivers' receptions, 42.8% of the team's targets among receivers, 55.1% of the team's yards, 6.8% or a 6.8 yard difference in his yards per reception and every other receiver's yards per reception. And he's got 40% of the receivers' touchdowns. The rest of the receivers have, or he has 2 of the 5 total touchdowns from wide receivers on this team. So very quietly, and Tet McMillan hasn't even fully broken out yet, but very quietly, Tet McMillan is, in some ways, as you look at Garrett Wilson and the way this Jets offense is built, is similar with Carolina, where there's not a whole lot outside of him. And if you can take him away, that's a clear path to shutting down this Carolina offense on top of getting home and making life miserable for Bryce Young. So those are my 3 defensive keys. Contain Rico Dowdle, get pressure on Bryce Young, take away Tet McMillan. Now we'll move on here to some of the X Factors matchup to watch. And of course, my prediction here to close things out. A couple offensive X Factors. This is an obvious one, but it's Justin Fields. I talk about what he's got to do with his legs. He's not going to have to go out there tomorrow, and you don't expect him to light it up in the pass game. And you hope this can be a game where they can run the football. But he's a big factor in what this offense does tomorrow. He's a big factor in just an X factor overall. Like one of the storylines in this game. As much as Glenn can compliment him and praise him and defend him, if he goes out there tomorrow and the Jets have 2 to 3 3-and-outs to open up the game, and you look up and they're down 13-0 or 10-0, and the Boo Birds are out at MetLife Stadium, and there's going to be a lot of empty seats tomorrow because Carolina's not going to be a fan base that's going to take it up. It's not like it's going to be full of Dallas fans or any other bigger fan base that comes in. There's going to be a lot of empty seats tomorrow. But the Boo Birds are out. Team is trailing. Fields looks lost. You have to bench him. So Fields has to be 10 times better tomorrow. Coming off of the negative 10 passer rating game, a lot of pressure on Fields tomorrow. There is. You follow up last week's performance with struggles early in this game, there's no reason why Tyrod Taylor should not be put in the game at that point. I already talked about it, but Mason Taylor, Arian Smith, two guys that I think you've got to get involved in the pass game tomorrow. Breece Hall as well. And throw Tanner Engstrand out there. Tomorrow's going to be a very big challenge for Tanner Engstrand. How can he get this offense to move the football and put up points and stay in this game and try and pull out a win without Garrett Wilson and a quarterback right now that is lost? Tough challenge against a defense that's 10th in football total. So Tanner Engstrand, another X factor that I think you have to throw in here. As for the defense, I've already talked about Jermaine Johnson's impact last week. I think you look at him in this game, both stopping the run and getting to the quarterback. Huge role. Quinnen Williams as well quietly has put together a dominant season against the run. One of the only Jets. 90.3 run defense grade. That's third among all defensive tackles. And I'll even throw Jamie and Sherwood out here. Jermaine, Quinnen are like the good X factors. Jamie and Sherwood's an X factor for a little bit more of the negative reason, and that is more of the concerning reason, which is the struggles that he's had. I mean, he got completely lost in coverage against the fullback last week against the Denver Broncos for a touchdown. He's been terrible in coverage. Sherwood tomorrow needs to have a better game. Needs to have a better game tomorrow. Moving forward, he's got to have better games. He's got to start to show some sense of progress. So defensive X factor there. Matchups to watch. Like I said, Justin Fields against this Panthers defense. Jets wide receivers against this Panthers secondary. Could get ugly there quick. Minus Garrett Wilson, who's out. Defensive matchups to watch. Jets run defense against Rico Dowdle. You want to throw Chuba Hubbard out there. Whoever the running back is, it'll be a challenge here for this Carolina team. Sauce Gardner against Tet McMillan. Sauce coming off of a better game. Get some looks against Tet McMillan. See what he looks like. Or hopefully goes out there, has a good game. Jamie and Sherwood against Bryce Young in this Panthers pass game. That's another big matchup. He's been terrible in coverage. Needs to have a better game tomorrow. So that has all led us up until this point. My prediction, I say it about every week, and I'll continue to say it until this Jets team gives me a reason to pick them and proves to me that they can actually win a game. I think the Panthers are going to win, and I'm going to continue to pick against them. And I continue to say it. I continue to emphasize. I hope I'm wrong. I want to be wrong. I want this team to win. I want this team to start being competitive. I want this team to start showing progress. I want Aaron Glenn to start show progress. I want to see that all. But right now, you just can't have faith in that happening. And until it does, I think most Jet fans are in the same mindset of you don't expect much. So I'm going to go Panthers 23-13. I think they do enough on offense. I don't think it's a day where they light the Jets up. I think the Jets defense will be okay in this game. I don't think it'll be going to be their worst game. It's not going to be like they were last week. 23 points is with a competent offense would put you in a position. I just don't think this Jets offense tomorrow is going to be able to do enough without Garrett Wilson and with where Fields is at and his overall play. So Panthers 23-13. That's my prediction. What are your thoughts? Let me know down below your thoughts on this game, your prediction for this game. We'll be back tomorrow with the recap right after the game, so stay tuned for that. And appreciate you all as always. Get a win, pick up a win, give us something to cheer about tomorrow. That's all I ask for from this New York Jets team. Give us a victory Monday. Give us a week of positivity for once, as opposed to a week of just destroying this team for the same reasons every single week. Give me something different to talk about tomorrow on the post-game pod. That's all I ask. It's very hard asking for that out of this team because they haven't given it to us. But hopefully tomorrow can finally be the game there. So appreciate you all as always. Until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.